greeted neighbor. There once was a place where neighbors greeted neighbors in the quiet of summer twilight, where children chased fireflies and porch swings provided easy refuge from the cares of the day. It is the destination your soul has been waiting for. Welcome to The Secret Sits. I'm your host, John Dodson. Join us every Thursday as we uncover the secrets behind the world's most fascinating true crime cases. You can find all episodes of The Secret Sits for free on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you are hearing, reach out to us on Instagram and Facebook at TheSecretSitsPodcast or on Twitter at TheSecretSitsPod. Now, on with our story. Late into 1965, Walter Elias Disney, better known to the world as simply Walt Disney, announced plans to develop a theme park a few miles southwest of a small town called Orlando, Florida. This area of land would be called Disneyworld, and it would include a theme park named the Magic Kingdom. The Magic Kingdom would be an expanded version of the Disneyland Park, which had been opened in Anaheim, California in July of 1955. Along with the new plans for Disney World came Walt's plans for Epcot, or the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. Walt described Epcot as an experimental prototype community of tomorrow that will take its cue from the new ideas and new technologies that are now emerging from the creative centers of American industry. It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and systems. And Epcot will always be a showcase to the world for the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise. Sadly, on December 15, 1966, Walter Elias Disney passed away from lung cancer brought on from years of smoking. Walt's plans for Disney World pressed on, and the name was officially changed to Walt Disney World in honor of the company's founder and his legacy. Unfortunately, Walt's dreams of Epcot passed away with him. Walt had wanted a true human sociological change. He wanted Epcot to be a place where Central Floridians actually lived, worked, and played, all right there in the same innovative community. Epcot took on a new theme as a cultural representative park of discovery. Epcot contains the World Showcase. 11 different countries are featured, with actual cultural representatives working in their own country's pavilion. The other half of the park is the World Celebration. In this area of the park, you can experience innovative technology and see how science has brought us solutions for many of our daily problems. So there are some aspects of what Walt had dreamt of for his Epcot. There are people from all over the world working together, and there are displays of innovation. But Epcot did not turn out to be the sociological experiment Walt had intended. In the early 1990s, the Disney Development Company began working on a different take on Walt's dream city. They wanted to build a town where people could live, work, and play. They also wanted this town to be state-of-the-art. It would be completely self-contained. The company designed 4,900 acres of its property in the southern portion of the Reedy Creek Improvement District, and they budgeted $2.5 billion to begin this project. The former CEO of the Disney company, Michael Eisner, had an extremely high interest in this project. He wanted the Disney Development Company to make history and develop a town worthy of the Disney brand's legacy. The town would be named Celebration, and the first residents would begin moving in during the summer of 1996. But the company had a problem. How could they make sure that the community was diverse and had an air of inclusivity? This began a problem. So to combat that problem, the company placed advertisements in newspapers and magazines, which typically catered to African American and Hispanic readers. They also made brochures featuring racial minorities, and they hired African American staff members for the community sales office. In a further attempt to prevent racial discrimination against homebuyers, the first 350 houses and 123 apartments were sold to people whose names were all in a lottery drawing. Unfortunately, even with all of these efforts, by the year 2000, the demographic makeup of Celebration, Florida, was 88% white, compared to the demographics around Celebration, which were only 59% white. I live just down the road from Celebration, Florida, and I'll tell you, it is not an actual town. It's actually just an extremely large neighborhood. It is fancy, and the houses' exteriors are inspired by different forms of architecture, including classical, colonial, French, coastal, Mediterranean, and Victorian. They have their own schools, grocery stores, and restaurants, and it's kind of more like another Disney attraction rather than a real neighborhood. Everything is neat and clean and precise. Very precise. If you live in a community with an HOA, let me tell you, your HOA has nothing on Celebration, Florida. This HOA will tell you what trees you can plant, what color mulch you're allowed to use, as well as how deep and wide the mulch is required to be. All curtains or blinds have to be white on the side that face the exterior of the home. Things like that. By now, you may be asking yourself, am I listening to the right podcast? I thought we were going to talk about a murder. Well, let's get to it. Even though our case this week is extremely current and fresh, I want to begin this part of our story way back in 1980, when Tony Todt was just 4 years old. Tony and his family were living in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, when one day someone just walked into their home and shot Tony's mother. Tony heard his mother's screams mere moments before the trigger was pulled, and Tony watched his mother's eye explode from the bullet ripping through it. It was discovered that Tony's own father, Bob Todt, who was a teacher at the time, had hired one of his students to murder his wife, Loretta. Bob had been having quite a few extramarital affairs, and he simply wanted his freedom. Bob, to this day, claims he was innocent and that he had nothing to do with his wife's attempted murder. Loretta, even after having been shot in the face, continued to stand by her cheating, misogynistic husband. The judge at the trial, Alan Rubenstein, said that Bob was a very convincing man, a charming sort of guy, but he also saw in the man an absolutely cold and remorseless individual. Bob was convicted in December of 1980 and sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. In 1984, Bob went before the judge again, and his sentence was reduced to 5 to 10 years. Bob Todt never took responsibility for his criminal actions, but he was remorseful about his affairs, which he now thinks helped to shape the mind of his young, impressionable son, Tony. In the months following the shooting, the Todt family was in shambles. Loretta was recovering from her gruesome injury. Bob had been arrested, convicted, and resentenced, and Loretta had decided to move from Pennsylvania to Connecticut. After the move to Connecticut, Loretta finally came to her senses and began believing the prosecution's versions of what had happened to her, and she divorced Bob in 1981. Tony's sister Chrissy said that their mother's decision to move and remarry was made for her and her brother. Loretta wanted to give her children the best chance that she could at having a normal childhood. The man Loretta married would be the man the two youngsters considered their true father. This man tried his hardest to be the best father he could be to these two new children in his life. But Tony was plagued by nightmares about seeing his mother shot, and the trauma of this incident was placed deep inside of him. Loretta and her new husband sent Tony to therapy for years. They supported him in any ways that they were capable. During his father's time in prison, Bob Todt had his children's names tattooed on his chest. Upon his release, Bob stayed in Pennsylvania for a while, and in 1999, he started a company called TC Enterprises, Inc. This was a consulting business, and the name is derived from his two children's names, Tony and Chrissy. But Bob had not actually seen nor communicated with his children for decades. This all changed in January of 2010, when Chrissy found out that Tony had begun communicating with their father over Facebook. Chrissy was pissed at her brother, 1, for speaking to their father, and 2, because he hadn't told her. There was some sort of magnetism between Tony and his father Bob. Perhaps because they had not known the man for much of his life, and this was the man who gave him life to begin with. Soon a meeting was arranged. The first time they met each other was in early 2010. Bob traveled to Tony's home in Colchester to visit. He met Tony's wife, Megan, and the couple's 2 sons, Alec and Tyler. Bob described Megan as the mother of all mothers. Bob watched as Tyler danced in the living room, still just a toddler, and Megan danced with him, picking up the small boy into her arms and dancing. Bob would visit again a few months later. This visit was a sadder affair, as the trip was to attend the funeral of Bob's sister. After this second visit, Bob did not see his children again. He would text and write a letter ever so often, but these messages typically went unanswered. Chrissy said that after the second visit, she and Tony mutually decided to cut contact with their biological father. In 2017, Anthony Todt's family rented a house in Celebration, Florida. Anthony, who went by Tony, and his wife Megan now had 3 children. Alec was 13, Tyler 11, and Zoe was 4. The family also included a small black and white dog named Breezy. This was the typical type of family who would move into Celebration. They were, well, white, and they had a close-knit family who were very warm to everyone around them. Although they were renting a house in Celebration, Florida, Tony was still working in Connecticut as a physical therapist. Not only was Tony a successful physical therapist, he actually owned 2 different physical therapy clinics in Connecticut. On LinkedIn, Tony Todt said he was the owner of Family Physical Therapy in Colchester and East Hampton, Connecticut, for more than 11 years. He wrote that he had an MSPT in physical therapy from Sacred Heart University. Tony is also affiliated with an LLC called Performance Edge Sports. He was the man with the magic touch. All of his patients raved about how Tony could fix anything: back pain, foot pain, whatever. The Facebook page for Family Physical Therapy describes it as follows: At Family PT in Connecticut, we use patient-centered approaches to focus on the whole individual, together as a family. Our experienced clinicians will help you set and reach your goals, from improving daily tasks to training athletes. No matter the cause, we will create a plan that will ensure your success each time you walk through our door. The family had just rented their new home in Celebration, Florida. Megan and the kids moved and began living full-time in Florida, while Tony continued his business in Connecticut and would fly down to Florida every weekend to be with his family. Tony and his family were also active in the Celebration community. Anthony coached his son's baseball team. He volunteered for community events, and he never missed a piano recital. This extremely long-distance situation does seem strange. However, the idea was for the two physical therapy clinics to eventually become autonomous so Tony could also permanently live with his family in Celebration. Meg and Todt remained in Florida, homeschooling the children and shuttling them back and forth to practices for their sports teams and piano lessons. Megan was also a licensed physical therapist, but she had left her career in order to cater more to raising her children. By all accounts, the family was doing really well with this stressful living situation. The boys' piano teacher said that the boys were doing amazingly. Their minds were like sponges, just soaking up all of the musical information he could provide. The Todts posted a lot on social media, showing a loving family living a majestic life just a stone's throw from the happiest place on earth. But the facades of Facebook and Celebration hid a much more sinister situation which was taking place. Sadly, those closest to the Todt family would not realize that anything was wrong until it was much, much too late. Tony had last been with his extended family members on November 22nd in Connecticut for Thanksgiving dinner. The day prior, Tony had met with federal agents investigating his physical therapy business. During this interview, Tony admitted to authorities that he had been perpetrating a fraud scheme against Medicaid and private insurance companies, which had netted him thousands of dollars in profits he had never actually earned. On December 29th, 2019, after not hearing from her brother for an entire week, Tony's sister Chrissy called the Osceola County Sheriff's Office.
I'm wondering if somebody can do a wellness check on my brother and his family. They've been really sick for probably like the past week and a half, and I can't seem to get a hold of them.
Okay, give me just a moment. And let me see, I think you said two.
I'm calling from Connecticut, so obviously there's no way for me to easily check. He doesn't have any other family down there.
Give me one moment, please. All right. When was the last time you heard from them, ma'am?
The last time I physically talked to him was on, last time I physically talked to him was either Monday or Tuesday, and he was texting my sisters and I up until Thursday. Was supposed to call us between yesterday and today, and we haven't been able to get a hold of him. I can't get a hold of him, my sister-in-law, or even my nephew.
Okay, what is your name?
It's my cell phone.
Now, that address, is that an apartment or is that a house?
He's renting a house.
Okay.
But he flies down, he lives up here during the week and he flies down for the weekend, so he usually has, I think he's got a rental when he goes down there.
Okay, what is your sister-in-law's name?
My sister-in-law's name is Megan Todt.
And do you have a phone number for her? You said they were sick or something like that you mentioned at the beginning?
Yeah, they've been really sick. I guess they've had the flu. But they've had the flu probably for a couple weeks. They were really down and out during Christmas. The only one we've been able to talk to is my brother. And now, like I said, we can't get hold of any of them. We heard from him, I think it was, last time, like I said, I heard from him was Thursday. When he was supposed to call us, he was supposed to check in with us yesterday, and then he was, because they were doing their Christmas yesterday, supposedly, and then he was supposed to call us.
The last time Chrissy had spoken to her brother, he had told her that the entire family had come down with the flu. Chrissy continued to text her brother until the text messages stopped being returned. That is when she made the call for a welfare check. The sheriff's office dispatched a car to the Todt home in Celebration, Florida. When officers arrived, they encountered nothing abnormal. There was no car present in the driveway. All of the curtains and blinds were drawn, and no one answered the door. It just seemed as if no one was home. So they left. 12 days later, Chrissy called the Osceola County Sheriff's Office again, but this time she requested a welfare check at a different address.
Hi, I don't know who I need to speak with. I'm curious if I can have a wellness check done.
What's the address for the wellness check?
The address for the wellness check is... I had actually called on December 29th, and I had an officer go out because I was concerned. My brother and his family, they had all been sick, but there's actually been more developments. There's actually an active FBI investigation that's happening up here in Connecticut. And I just in conversations with my sister, my sister-in-law was making a comment about, and we just kind of put it all together, about basically the world ending on the 28th, and nobody has talked to them. Nobody physically talked to my sister-in-law since the 26th of December, and my brother has stopped texting as of Monday. So I don't know if there's a way that somebody can go out. They are renting a place. They're actually being evicted from that property. But that's the last place that we know that they were supposedly at. But they have a condo that's right around the corner as well.
What's your phone number?
My sister-in-law's name is Megan, Megan. Mm-hmm. Last name is Todt, T-O-D as in David, T as in Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
My brother's name is Tony, Tony.
Mm-hmm.
Same last name. They have 3 kids.
And so they think the world is ending and you're worried they're going to
Well, there's an active FBI investigation up here in Connecticut, and I'm concerned because of that, because of a lot of stuff that's been happening, that there could be something a little bit more happening. I forgot I'm wrong.
You said Connecticut? I'm so sorry.
Yes. We live in Connecticut. The investigation is here in Connecticut. He flew back to Florida on the 22nd of November. We didn't find out about all this until the week of Christmas, and we've had a very, very hard time getting anything from him, and he has stopped all communications. And we have not spoken to Megan. Nobody's heard from Megan.
You said since Monday. That was the
6th. The last time anybody talked to my brother, text my brother, not even talking, text my brother was on the 6th.
Yeah, does anybody have any medical conditions?
Yes. My sister-in-law, we're not exactly sure. That's the other part of this. Supposedly they were all sick with the flu around that time, but she has some liver issues, and there could be some other health issues that I'm not 100% sure of, but the last time that we had and like I said, I called down on the 29th, the police did go. They checked with the neighbors, and the neighbors said that nobody had been there. I had been messaging some of the neighbors, but it's just really strange.
Yeah.
And I actually spoke with one of the agents up here, and he even recommended to call back down there and see if we can have another wellness check.
The property Chrissy is asking the police to check this time was a condo, also owned by Tony. It stands about 1/4 of a mile from their house in Celebration. Still, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and no contact was made during the second trip. January 6th was zeroed in on as the last day any friends or family had any form of communication from anyone in the Todt family. These last communications were all in text form, as phone records would prove. One family member received a text from Tony's phone saying the phone had been found in a Starbucks in Sarasota, Florida, and it was being turned over to the police. That's strange. From phone records, we cannot indicate who sent this text. A friendly neighbor in Celebration sent Megan Todt a text to inform her that the condo on Longview Avenue had an eviction notice posted on the door. Thank goodness for nosy neighbors. The concerned neighbor received a text back which simply said, "Okay, thanks." We cannot definitively say who sent this text. The Todt family's 2 physical therapy offices in Connecticut closed without any warning. That was almost 2 months ago, and the landlord of the single-family home in Celebration had posted an eviction notice on the door as well, which went untouched. Suddenly, a Facebook group sprung up titled, "Looking for the Todt Family." It included members from Connecticut and Florida, all concerned family members and citizens who had no idea where the family had gone. In Connecticut, the FBI had opened an investigation, and they reached out to the Osceola County Sheriff's Office as well. The FBI and the Inspector General were investigating Tony Todt in the Medicaid fraud case. It had been discovered that since 2015, Tony had been billing insurance companies for services never provided. He would charge for clients he was no longer seeing, and for the clients Tony was actually still treating, he would charge double or even triple the amount that was owed. Another red flag in this investigation was the fact that Tony would date some of the invoices with dates corresponding to weekend dates. And as we know, Tony did not work on the weekends. This was the time he spent with his loving family in Florida. In fact, Tony's physical therapy practice was not even open on the weekends. Tony was suspected of having collected around $130,000 through these fraudulent practices. When authorities had questioned Tony about this matter on November 22, 2019, Tony admitted that he had used the money to repay more than 20 high-interest short-term loans he had taken out. The debt was crippling, and Tony had already lost 3 civil judgments against him, totaling more than $500,000. He told the investigators that he just did not know what else to do. Tony said that he wanted to plead guilty, and the agents advised Tony to retain an attorney, and they let him go after he assured them he would return to Connecticut on December 8th to turn himself in. But, surprise, Tony never showed up. Family members, acquaintances, and federal officials began to inundate the Osceola County Sheriff's Office with calls. The family kept asking for wellness checks, and the federal officials had an active arrest warrant, and they were also trying to locate Tony Todt. On January 9th, an FBI agent called asking the sheriff's office for help finding Tony Todt, and quickly following that call, Chrissy Caplet called asking for another wellness check. During this call, Chrissy mentioned for the first time that the family had found out about the FBI investigation. On January 10th at approximately 5 p.m., 2 deputies at the behest of the FBI and the Todt family performed a wellness check at both of the Todt's family homes in Celebration, Florida. The deputies first approached the single-family home on Reserve Place and knocked on the door. No answer. They then moved around the exterior of the home to the door attached to the garage apartment. No one answered this door either. They once again reported that the doors were locked and all windows had the blinds and curtains closed. Mail, still in the mailbox, was dated January 6th, and an eviction notice, still on the door, was dated December 31st. Next, the deputies traveled to the condo, located on Longview Avenue. Once again, there was still an eviction notice posted on the door, and when the deputies knocked, they received no answer. While the deputies drove around the condo's building complex, they located the Todt family's maroon Honda Odyssey. It had been located behind Building 11. After making the wellness checks at both residences, the deputies called Tony's sister back and gave her the update. They had gotten no answer at either home. They had located the family vehicle at the complex, and the entire family's phones are now going straight to voicemail. The following day, on January 11th, the same deputy went back to both of the Todt's homes. Again, no answer, and the van had not been moved. On January 12th, Yasmin Dordoy called the police for a wellness check. Yasmin told the 911 operator, "I own the property that I rent out, and I have concerns for the family." She then continued, "On social media, I've just sort of seen that people have not seen or heard from this family in a long time, and I'm trying to serve notice to evict them because they've not been paying rent." Yasmin was genuinely concerned about the children. She continued, "I'm concerned for the family and I'm concerned for my property. I just thought it was me they weren't communicating with because they owed me money. But in general, they've not been in contact with anybody." And this was true. No one had had contact with this family for 6 days. Just one day later, January 13th, would bring the first signs of life from anyone in the Todt family. Federal agents with the Department of Health and Human Services had been staking out the family's home in Florida. And just like magic, one day, Tony Todt walked right out of his front door. And the female agent sitting on the home at 202 Reserve Place called for backup.
What's the warrant for?
Healthcare fraud.
Okay.
Federal offense. Federal warrant. So we would be transporting. We just need assistance just to have some marked units there. We're not sure if there's children in the house. He does have 3 children. His wife should be there, but that's an unknown.
Has he made any threats towards the children or the wife that you know of?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Has he made any threats towards the children or the wife that you know of?
There's concerns there. I don't know of any direct threats, but there are concerns. He does know that he is being investigated. We have executed a search warrant. As far as we know, he's tapped out all his finance resources, and he has not contacted his family in over a week.
Okay. Do you know if he has any weapons or any history of having weapons on him?
Unknown.
Are there any vehicles in the driveway in case he tries to leave on any of them?
There's a garage, but it's funny. He's at the house, but their only vehicle that we know of is parked over at the apartment, which is a couple blocks away. But somebody did see him in a white SUV like a week or two ago, but we don't have any record of him owning a white SUV.
Tony had walked out of the front door and just sat down on his front porch while the female agent watching the house called for backup. While waiting on backup to arrive, Tony stood up and lumbered back into the house and closed the door. When backup arrived, deputies and federal agents surrounded the house. The officers knocked several times and announced their presence and their intent to arrest Anthony Todt. There was no response. When they tried the front door this time, it was unlocked. They immediately made the decision to enter the home. As soon as agents opened the unlocked door to the house, the sweet, putrid smell of death assaulted them. Then they heard a man's voice mumbling. It was coming from the top of the stairs. When they looked to the top of the stairs, they saw Tony standing there, wearing only underclothes. He seemed to be impaired in some way, and he was struggling in his attempt to descend the stairs. Agents went partially up the stairs and assisted Tony down to the ground floor. They asked Tony where Megan was, and Tony responded that she was upstairs asleep. Tony shouted for his wife. "Megan!" he shouted, but there was no response. Agents asked Tony about his children, and he told them that he thought they were sleeping over at a friend's house. The entire time the agents were talking to Tony, he seemed really out of sorts, and he clearly did not understand what was going on around him. Officers headed up the stairs and took a right into the owner's suite. There they made a grisly discovery. There on the bed was a body wrapped in blankets. One black and blue foot emerged from the death shroud. The deputy called out Megan's name, and there was no response. The officer pulled back a small portion of the blanket to reveal what turned out to be Megan's face, which had somehow turned as black as leather, according to the officer. On the floor of this room was a mattress. Here, the officer discovered 2 more small bodies, also wrapped in blankets, 13-year-old Alec, and 11-year-old Tyler. Both boys looked partially mummified, and each small boy was holding a set of black rosary beads. At first, the police could not find 4-year-old Zoe, and they began asking Tony where she was. He had no idea where she was. He could provide them with no information. After searching the house, Zoe was eventually found, right there at the foot of her parents' bed. She had been wrapped in sheets, and she was so tiny and decomposed that she had just been overlooked when police had found the girl's mother and 2 brothers. Breezy, the family's precious black and white dog, was also eventually located and was deceased as well. The officers found a loaded gun, a bloody mattress, and restraints affixed to the bed frame. Tony told the officers that he had taken a fatal dose of Walgreens brand Benadryl. He was then rushed to Celebration Hospital, where they had to treat him for an overdose. After recovering in the hospital for 2 days from this attempted suicide, Tony was taken into custody and questioned by police detectives. Tony told police that he had killed his family. The evidence showed that Tony had given all of his family members the same Walgreens Benadryl, and that he had stabbed them, all except the tiny 4-year-old Zoe, who showed no signs of how she had been killed. Tony Todt was then charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 charge of animal cruelty. After the family had been autopsied, the medical examiner released the official cause of death for Megan, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe. His findings were as follows. Based upon the circumstances as currently known, the autopsy findings and toxicology analysis, the cause of death of Todt was homicidal violence in unspecified means in association with diphenhydramine toxicity. This last part came from the drug commonly known as Benadryl. It was also unclear how Breezy, the pupper, was killed. While all of this was taking place, Tony's sisters, Chrissy and Kelly, were getting no updates at all. They each, in turn, called the Osceola County Sheriff's Office, very frustrated.
My name is Kelly Ball, and my brother is Tony Todt.
My name is Chrissy. I hear that there is a death investigation that's happening in Celebration, and I'm curious if I can get a little bit of information. I believe that is my brother's house that they're at. I'm trying to get confirmation on that. I've already called. I think it's Detective Sean Doherty, and he hasn't called back, which I get. They're in the middle of something, but it's just a stuffy way to find out on Facebook.
And I would like to personally echo and support this family's frustrations. Family members finding out about their loved ones' cases via social media instead of directly from the police is ridiculous. During March and April, while in jail, Tony made a series of phone calls to his sister.
It's good to hear your voice.
I've been held in isolation, and I still am. I'm making this phone call under direction and supervision.
No, I get it.
No, it's beyond what I can explain right now.
No, trust me. So just, high level. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm in a isolation cell, wearing a vest only for the past at least 6 weeks, they've been telling me. I don't remember anything pretty much over Christmas and the first week I got here. I don't remember coming here. I don't remember anything after the events, what happened, all that kind of stuff. I have no idea where I was, where I am, and the only thing I remember is being at the hospital, I guess I assume before I got here, and I remember them talking about charcoal, 5th floor, and catheter, and that's all I remember. And I will remember waking up here and seeing one of the officers that I've become pretty close with. Other than that, I have no idea anything.
I'm very, very worried about you.
Do me a favor, because I'm meeting my attorney this afternoon. There's a couple things. Number one, and I know, you know me, I'm always down to business, but I need to get a couple things done.
Tell me.
Yeah, on that sheet with, I'm with her, thank you. Thank you, Miss Mendoza. She's been a sweetheart.
Oh?
Mendoza, you talked to her.
No, I didn't really talk to her because she wouldn't talk to me, because you need to sign an authorization for her to talk to me.
I did. I signed off.
Okay.
All that kind of stuff a couple weeks ago.
She wouldn't tell me anything because I feel like I've had to. It's really hard on this side trying to just see if you're okay.
I don't even know what is going on.
I know, and it's best just to talk to your attorney. You know,
I read one of the news articles. One of the social worker brought into me, and of course Robert. You know.
I don't even want to get into him.
Okay. I
mean, we can. It's up to you, but I'm
I want to
just.
talk about it right now. I want to talk about other things.
Tell me, keep going.
I love you. Okay.
I love you too.
Tony was now facing capital murder charges, and although he had already confessed to killing his family, he recanted that confession, and he had an entirely different version of events that he claimed took place. Tony is now claiming that his deceased wife, Megan, was responsible for the children's murders. In a letter Tony wrote, which was obtained by the Orlando Sentinel, Tony lays out his new version of events. He says in this letter that Megan, his wife, made a pie, which she laced with Benadryl and Tylenol PM. She fed the children the pie and then put them into separate rooms. She woke each child, one at a time, starting around 11:30 p.m., stabbing and suffocating each child. Tony then goes on to say that when he made this discovery, he ran to the bathroom and threw up. He says that Megan told him what happened and then asked him to pray with her. He goes on to say that he refused to sit with her to pray. He needed to see his kids. She claimed that there had been no struggle from the children, but he did not believe her. He then went and got a warm washcloth and wiped each of their faces off. He held each child and then attempted to make each one more comfortable by closing their eyes and mouths. And then he loosened their nasal passages, whatever that means. Tony then wrapped each child in a blanket. Tony says Megan checked on him a few times during this, and she would ask him if he was okay. His response to her was, "No, you murdered our children." Tony says Megan's response to this was that she had not murdered them, but released their souls. She was very calm, and then Megan killed herself right in front of Tony by stabbing herself in the stomach. Tony claimed he was 10,000% innocent of all of these preposterous charges. It would take 2 years for Anthony Todt to go on trial for the murder of his entire immediate family. During the trial, Tony maintained his innocence. He even took the stand in his own defense. Through Tony's defense lawyer questioning him, Tony cried and sometimes openly sobbed while answering questions. Whereas when facing cross-examination, Tony had fits of anger on the stand. There were times he just seemed annoyed and answered in sarcastic comments. Tony put forth many different versions of the events which had led to his children being killed. But the state had evidence that included Tony's January 15, 2020 interview with the Osceola County Sheriff's detectives. During this interview, Tony matter-of-factly gives details about how he had murdered his children. They also presented body camera footage of when the police entered his Celebration home and found his family's dead bodies on January 13th, 2020. It was concluded that the family was killed sometime between December 14th and December 18th, 2019. Before Tony was sentenced, Cindy Kopko, Megan's aunt, spoke, and she remembered Megan as gentle and empathetic, and the 3 children she described as talented and warm. She also stated that she and her entire family misses Megan and the kids every day. When Tony was given the opportunity to speak, he maintained one of his versions of events. The version of events he spoke of was that he was not home when the children were murdered, and that Megan's deep-seated spiritual beliefs had pushed his wife to develop a plan to kill their children in order to save their souls. Tony's attorney implored him to stop talking because he was not helping their case. Tony told the court, "This was a personal catastrophe in everybody's life in my family, including myself. I maintain my innocence. I provided for my wife, did everything I could for my wife," Tony said. "She was progressively sick over the years. There were days which were worse, days which were better. She was kept on a pedestal from me." Tony said he had gained significant weight because he negated himself and got only 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night because he was treating his wife. "I love my wife. I love my children," the defendant continued. "I was not there the night my children died." As the first guilty verdict was read, Tony began to weep. He then began to shake his head no, while the remainder of the verdicts were read. After a 15-minute break, the judge went directly into sentencing. During his ruling, the judge called Anthony Todt a destroyer of worlds, and he went on to sentence Tony to 4 life sentences and the maximum sentence he could impose for animal cruelty. Friends and loved ones from Florida and Connecticut still struggle to understand what could have happened to make this horrific murder take place. Tony's sister Chrissy is looking back to a deep-seated trauma in Tony's life. It may not be the answer, but it could be the shadow of an answer. She also thinks about the Medicaid fraud scheme, which could have landed Tony in prison for a year or 2, and she wonders, being a 4-year-old and seeing his dad being taken away, I don't think he wanted the same childhood for his kids, Chrissy said. It doesn't excuse it. It certainly doesn't excuse it. Looking back, Chrissy said she wishes her family had known more about what was going on with Tony. But it's impossible to fully gauge a person's suffering from the outside. She said, "I wish we would have known, so we would have been able to help. But now, we'll never have the answers." After I finished writing this episode, my husband and I decided to take a drive by the Todt family home and condo in Celebration, Florida. There sits an unassuming home, bright white and beautifully appointed, as are all of the homes around it. A home which held a dark secret and showed us all what a facade can truly look like. There once was a place where neighbors greeted neighbors in the quiet summer twilight, where children chased fireflies and porch swings provided easy refuge from the cares of the day. Is Celebration the destination your soul has been waiting for? The Secret Sits podcast is researched and written by me, John Dodson. Audio engineering by Gabriel Dodson. Original logo artwork provided by Tony Lay.